Hello, welcome to episode 20 of Creative Dynamos. Hey, I said it right the first time. Josh, I don't know if you've listened to any of my interviews, but I have had a devil of a time getting dynamos out of my mouth. I have wanted to say dominoes for some reason. Uh, it's my own podcast that I can't even say the name right. Tonight I have with me Dr. Josh Olds. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Josh and I, I'm not even sure how we crossed paths, but we crossed paths and I'm glad that we did.
Yeah,
Yeah, just social media sometimes has this way of
there are a lot of people that I have on social media that I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I met. And then you kind of can trace that back a little bit, and it usually comes back to Ted Dekker or writing in some form or fashion. But yeah, you're not the only one. There are a lot of people that I'm like, oh, these are friends, and they're social media friends. I've never met them in person.
and I'd love to meet you in person. The only problem with that is you live in Australia and I live in North.
Yes, I have recently moved to Australia, and I will say I love everything about it. Except that it is far from everything that all the connections, everything that I've developed in life. Yeah, for the first 35 years of life is now different, but we are enjoying our time here down under, building a new life, getting set up, and it's been great.
Well, we're going to get into all of that momentarily, but Josh, you're a pastor, teacher, author. Um, Let me help me understand your journey. How you look like you're fairly young. How long have you been a pastor? How long have you been a writer? What does that journey
Yeah.
look like?
So I, as a teenager, just really felt God's call to be a pastor. And that was just sort of like the only path ever for me. So that's why when I went to university for and then seminary, and then graduated from seminary at the end of 2012 and moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2013 to be a pastor at an Asian American church. And it was one of those God things where I don't know if you're familiar with Tulsa, but Tulsa has Labrador University has several large mega churches, several large Bible institutes, several large Christian universities. So moving there as someone in the early 20s, fresh out of seminary, you're not getting too many job offers or callbacks because everyone's hiring within that ecosystem that they already know about. And I'm the new guy coming from 1,000 miles away. And I had a friend that had grown up in the Tulsa area, and he said, well, my parents still live in Tulsa. Why don't you send me your resume? I'll send to them, and maybe they know something. And a few days later, I got a call from a church that said, and this might be too weird to you, it is, we understand, but we're a Chinese American church, and we're looking for a youth pastor. I was like, so long as you understand that I am very white, and I speak no Chinese whatsoever, yeah, let's have a conversation. And it was my friend's childhood church. And so I had met his parents on a few occasions, and they flew me down, and it was a God thing. And I stayed there for 7 years. So that was my introduction to the ministry. When you're really being thrust into this multicultural position, leading a Chinese American church. And I was there initially as the youth pastor, and then as time grew on, we had a contingent of the congregation that was primarily English speaking. And at the time, every service if I was preaching, was in English translated into Chinese. If someone else was preaching, it was in Chinese translated into English.
Okay.
And we eventually got kind of carved down an English speaking congregation or service within that. Still did some things together as a whole church. So it wasn't two churches in one building, but kind of built out of that an English speaking ministry. From that, I was there for 7 years, and by that time, my wife had graduated with her degree in occupational therapy. We'd adopted 2 children. We knew it was time to move on to the next thing that God had for us. And we had long had a plan of my wife doing travel therapy, taking 3-month positions in different cities throughout the U.S. And we were just going to travel, and we were going to see where God put us, see what cities we liked, see what opportunities popped up for ministry. And so in early 2020, we sold our house and all of our things and set off on this adventure to travel the United States. Now, I don't know if you remember what happened in 2020.
Something major, as I recall. Yeah.
But there was not, very shortly into that, there was not any traveling happening. There was not any jobs happening. The world was completely shut down. And we found ourselves jobless, homeless, and having no possessions except what we could get in 2 vehicles. And that began a journey that we lived with my friends, the same friend who got me the job in the Asian American church. We moved in with his family for a few months. I actually continued working at my church during that time because they were locked down and we were doing all of our services via Zoom. So I continued working with them. And through that process of now we're looking for, well, our plans got blown up. What's the next thing? My wife got a job offer in England to work on a U.S. military base in schools there, be a pediatric occupational therapist. And so we committed there for 2 years and did that. And we stayed for 4. And during that time, the time that we were going to be traveling, that's supposed to be my like rest time, my sabbatical. And so during that time, I got my doctorate in Christian leadership and ministry. And I ended up partnering with some church organizations in England. I wasn't in any formal ministry role there. And we stayed for 4 years. And then I came back to the States for 9 months while I preparing since moved to Australia, did some church consulting. And now I'm out here in Australia and I'm so lucky for that perfect church. So if anybody has any connections to churches sort of in the South Melbourne area in Australia, that'd be great. But yeah, I think what I learned the most of that time is I've spent 5 years as a pastor outside of formal ministry is how much that the job is a calling to where I'm a pastor even if there's not a church for me to be associated with. And my goal during this time, especially since I moved to Australia, has been to figure out where I can use my training, use my expertise to help people. Because I have found that there are so many people who, I think particularly when there were COVID lockdowns, for whatever reason, stopped going to church, haven't gone to church, they haven't returned. And for whatever reason. And I think some of those reasons, many of those reasons, the people that I've talked with, good reasons, at least not to go back to the church they had been in. And so a big part of my ministry during this time has been to be a pastor to those who are disaffected or disillusioned by institutional church and provide for them a ministry that hopefully feels welcoming, that feels inclusive, that doesn't have the baggage that maybe their own churches had, and to hopefully provide some sort of healing that, and if that leads them back into an embodied church in their community, great, what I'm hoping for. But if that just helps them keep their connection to Jesus, that's great as well.
Absolutely. That's your journey as a pastor. What does your journey as an author look like?
That one, I never set out to be an author. And yet I can tell you that my mom would tell you that as a kid, I hated writing. I was homeschooled and I would cry. I was a 10, 11, 12-year-old that I had to write. But I always loved to read. And I think what it was, now that I'm an adult and can reflect back on it, is that what was going on up here couldn't get out quickly enough to where it was exercising frustration because I couldn't get the story out. But it really began with reading. I love to read. I read to a very young age. I read everything all the time. And then around the time that I was like probably 11 or 12, then I started plagiarizing. That's really how I started writing. I can distinctly remember, and I'm so glad that we no longer have that computer with those files on it. I would sit down with the Wishbone book. So I'm already, one of the Wishbone like history books where they're doing an adaptation of Beowulf or something. What I remember specifically was they were doing an adaptation of Beowulf called Beowulf, obviously.
Sure.
And I sat down and I plagiarized. And I wrote the entire book, but with me as the main character and my dog as Wishbone.
We like to call it self-insert fan fiction.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And I did that so much that was really my start. And shortly thereafter, I was 14 or 15. There was a local homeschool art curriculum was doing a contest for art curriculum they were going to be writing. And they wanted students to send in artwork that would be featured in this art curriculum. And they wanted students to write Bible story adaptations.
Okay.
That would be featured. And there would be art lessons that were associated with it because we call art in the Bible for children. So I was like, this is great. I will submit. I wrote a story about Noah's Ark. I sent it in. I waited a few months. They got back with my parents and said, would you be interested in writing the entire book? And that was unexpected, wholly unexpected. But I said yes. They paid me a small fee. And it was a complicated experience because I was 13 and I had no business writing a Bible storybook. I did not know what I was doing, but I did it. They published it a few years later. So that was my first, my first brush with publishing. And that was really it. I didn't really do much writing after that. And then in my early 20s, late teens, I discovered Ted Dekker. And his stories really drew me back into reading and writing fiction. I hadn't for some time by that point.
I want to interrupt you there.
Yes.
So I'm a writer, and I've been writing fiction off and on for most of my life, and really seriously, probably the last 20 years. And Ted Dekker, as I'm a Christian, I went through a phase where I thought I could only read Christian fiction. And so I read a lot of bad Christian fiction. And Ted Dekker was one of the only good Christian fiction writers in sort of thriller genre that I found. And it was like a revelation, a little R. And yeah, so when I saw that you co-wrote a book with him, I was like, okay, we need to talk about it. So pick up from where you left off.
Yeah.
So you discovered Ted Dekker.
Yeah. I discovered Ted Dekker. My life changed, like literally. We talked earlier about my friend that I had. I met him through Ted Dekker. My wife, the reason why I moved out to Oklahoma, met her through Ted Dekker. And with his, what you were saying, with his stories, I saw that there could be Christian fiction that I thought was, especially as a late teens male, to see Christian fiction that wasn't Amish fiction, that wasn't romance, that was edgy, but still stay within certain boundaries. And so really, it was that theme that began the process. And I had kind of written some short fiction here and there, mostly just for me. At the time, I was starting university. I was working full time. There wasn't a whole lot of extra time. All of my writing was going towards school assignments. But I became very close with a group of people associated with Ted Dekker through a contest that he did in 2008 called the Books of History Contest. And this was right around the time when the Lost books were coming out, the first 4 books of that series. And they were giving away a car. If you played this game, it was an online game. If you played the game, you saw the clues, you win a car. That was the whole premise of it. I'm like, I would like a car. And so I signed up thinking I would play a game with a car. And it led me to this internet forum with a bunch of other people who, like me, enjoyed writing, who were serious about their faith, who loved Ted Dekker, who loved Christian fiction. And all of a sudden, I had a community that understood me. I have a community that, even though they were scattered throughout the United States, I was closer to them than I was to anybody else in my life at the time because of those shared connections. And when the contest ended, a group of us, the website shut down. We created our own website and kept talking. And also at the time, on Ted's website, there was an online forum that was very active. Ted just had a really active and engaged online community because of that. And that's just around the time that he started doing started doing in-person gatherings. So, and in his Circle trilogy, a big feature of the book is this gathering where everybody in the community gets together. So he decided to do this big weekend-long event called The Gathering. And it was a great time that all these friends that I had made from throughout the country, we all gathered together in Nashville, Tennessee, and we met Ted, got book signed, hung out all week. And so then during this time, I had kind of been slowly getting more and more into the anger of I don't know how to describe it. They're becoming more well-known within that community.
Sure.
And had been in contact with Kevin Kaiser, who was Ted's assistant to brand manager at the time. And then about a year and a half after that, they were planning for another gathering in 2010. So early 2011, the dates are muddled. But anyway, Kevin was just asking, but you write, don't you? And I'm like, well, I'm not saying no. Yeah, I like to write. I've written. And he's like, well, we need somebody who really knows the Dekker world and knows the world of Earth. Okay, like what's going on? What do you got? And he's like, we want to write this book called The Blood Book. And Ted doesn't have time to do it. Would you want to be part of it? And I said, yes. I didn't consider anything else. I'll make this work. I don't know how. I'll make it work. So we started out with, Ted had been talking about The Blood Book for some time. He wanted to write a series of journals of some characters that were associated with this series and mega series that he was writing called The Mission Chronicles. And it was a lot of it was associated with the Lost Books and the characters there, associated with Black, Red, and White, the Circle trilogy, and Green, which came out after that. And he decided that it was going to be too inside baseball to be traditionally published. They really wanted this to be like, really give readers a very deep and inside view. Really just a book that's for the fans.
Interesting.
Right at this time, Ted was also transitioning from the Christian publishing market to a general publishing market. And that's not to say his books were becoming less Christian, but just in general, he was moving from having Thomas Nelson as a publisher to Center Street and Shack as a publisher, so moving into one of the big five publishers. And the books that were about to come out were going to be traditionally published by a big publisher thriller, not marketed necessarily as Christian fiction. And as part of that, really to help his sales, they were doing a lot of special events and special things. I think it was if you ordered 5 copies of the book, then you would get a copy of the Blood Book. If you ordered 1 copy of the book, you would get a PDF copy of the Blood Book.
Okay.
And there was also there were other incentives as well. I know that he released as in PDF form the first draft of what would become Black, but released part of that. He released a book that was another initial draft of a book that was originally alleged to have been written by Thomas Hunter, who was the main character in the Circle trilogy. So there was a lot of specials and bonuses and incentives that were going around, but they really wanted to do this Blood Book. So it was me, Kevin Kaiser, one other gentleman who ended up dropping out, and Ted. And we sat down and planned out this book. And that was, I think, in 2010 and released in 2011, if I recall correctly. So yeah, absolute pleasure to be a part of. I do not, again, I think it was right place, right time, and who knows this world already. And yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed the process. Just in the short time we had, Ted taught me so much about what made good fiction, how to make the writing process work, a lot about his own workflow. And through that, we became good personal friends, and we still keep up to this day. So, he's gone on. I think that was Ted's first experience with self-publishing. Because it's just something that they just bound and printed on their own. And now everything that he does is independently published. It's his own thing. He's not through traditional publishers anymore.
I have really kept up with him since those early days where I was reading more Christian fiction. Yeah. Interesting. Huh. So since then, have you dipped your toes any more into fiction, or have you stayed in nonfiction?
I have had fiction ideas, and I have plotted some things out. I have written some things, and then inevitably, what I have found is that I read a book, and I'm like, that was it. That was the plot. So now I have to wait longer. And I really didn't at the time that I helped write the Blood book. I did not have time to be doing that. There were times where it was I was up for 48 hours straight to get through these deadlines. And then once I graduated and started my ministry, it was all about trying to set out my life. And by the time things got settled down, I now written some nonfiction. I really got into book reviewing. My website, lifeisstory.com. I've had that for a long time. It actually started because I wanted to read books and I had no money. So how are you going to get books to read if you have no money? Well, the best answer is the library. But I was also, because of the connections with Ted, being offered books from publishers in exchange for a review. It was right around the time where sort of blogging is starting to take off. So a lot of the publishers are starting to do incentive programs. You see that now through NetGalley, right?
Yeah.
NetGalley is a huge thing. A lot of it is ebooks. Back in the early days, then they used to have book blogger programs. Thomas Nelson, Tyndale, Waterbook Press, all the Christian publishers just started offering books in exchange for review. And so I started doing that. And I was like, this is a way that I can satiate my desire to read and to learn, but not break the bank as someone who's in their early 20s and doesn't have the money for it. Yes. And it just kept growing. And today we've got about 100,000 people a month visit the website. We do Christian fiction and nonfiction. I honestly, right now, I primarily handle the nonfiction stuff because it made more sense with my academic training expertise to go down that route. But I pick out the authors that I enjoy the most for fiction and write reviews for them. And I'm not saying that era of my life is ending, but I have moved from that into doing a lot more nonfiction writing, doing some small group curriculum writing, doing some journalistic writing for various outlets, freelance writing for other places.
Well, let's not let life as a story go just yet, because I know that's something that we can talk about. And just that phrase, life is a story, there's a lot to unpack there. Talk to me about when you set up life as a story, what you've got. Is it all just review? Is it all just reviews? Is there more to unpack there?
The website itself is 95% reviews. I have also done various podcasts throughout the years. The website's about 10 years old at this point, even older than that. So it's got an archive, thousands of books at this point that we've reviewed. We've talked with authors from Jerry Jenkins and Max Lucado about their books. And it really came under the heading of thinking about the title of the site and what I wanted it to be about was that I didn't want it to just be about fiction. I knew that I wanted to review nonfiction as well. And I had been writing for a site called Fiction Addict. And Fiction Addict would later actually get subsumed into Life is Story because of how some things went with that site. And So I was thinking of the process of like, what can I talk about fiction and nonfiction? And had really become drawn to this idea that when God creates us, God is creating stories. God is creating a story of us. We are his main character. And that through our lives, we then co-write with God what that story is going to be. And that got distilled into a concept that I felt covered both the creative aspects of fiction writing and the creative aspects of nonfiction writing, and would enable me then to talk a lot more about the story process. And I remember early on in the site, we did a lot of work of a lot of features of behind the scenes of story making and storytelling, and haven't done anything like that in recent years because of time and availability. But that was the impetus for it. And, Ted wanted me to call it Book Monkey, but I stuck with the story.
I think that's a better title for the story. But I just, I know in my case, like with so much of my writing, some of it gets weird, but it all comes out of some aspect the life I've led, still things I've experienced. I think with everybody that I talk to in this podcast that I'm creating, and not all of it's going to be writers. Down the pipe, I've got all kinds of different creative people I'll be interviewing. So far, it's mostly been writers, but we're all telling stories, whether we're doing it through music or podcasts about comic books or, stand-up comedy. Whatever the creative process is, we're telling stories. And our stories about our life experience. So I really resonate with the idea that life is God, and my way of looking at things. And God uses our lives to tell story. Yeah, that really speaks to me. So that's great. And I actually went through a period where I was reviewing books, other media for a site called Hollywood Jesus, which was was a great experience. And it was also a way to get free music and junkets and things like that. So yeah, kids, if you want to get free books, tell authors you want to review their book. There's a good chance they'll send at least I should. Yeah. But yeah, I think that the creative process is about taking your personal experiences, your inspirations, laying them out for the world to see, which is one of the things that makes it so hard, because you have to be willing to be transparent, honest about who you are. Yeah. Even if you can cover some of that with killing monsters. There's still a lot of honesty.
I think you can have functional storytelling that is serviceable and even good, and not have soul. And I won't name any authors, but I can think of a couple of very big name authors that I would describe as that. And I've read their books; they're good books, but they don't tell me much about who they are as a person. And they're not the kind of books that I'm going to go back to again and again. And the books that I found that I return to on an annual basis or every other year are the stories that are substantive, that speak beyond themselves, that I can tell the author put their soul into, put their worldview and their philosophies and what they hear about went into that story. And so you're not just making a connection with the story, you're making a connection with the storyteller when you read it. And that's a very personal thing to do. It's very vulnerable to put yourself out there like that. But I think it's what creates the stories that are worth telling and retelling.
Absolutely. There have been stories that I have written that I've had to stop writing temporarily because it's impacted me so much. I've had to like step back, regroup, back at it, just because I put so much of myself into the story that it was painful or draining to write. And that's something that I think that some readers don't understand completely about the process of writing or creating. I don't want to make this just about writing. Creating is there's done rightly, I think it is a very sacrificial process. So you're literally putting pieces of yourself to these things that you're creating. Again, if you're doing it right, and readers can tell. Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite directors, and you can tell how much love he has for his art form, and you can tell he's putting his passion, parts of his soul into these things. Love the movies or not, tell that he's putting himself into these things he does. And yeah, there are writers that are just cranking them out, or filmmakers that are just cranking them out, and they're not really. Michael Bay is putting a lot of soul to his movies. But they're a lot of fun to watch, but it's not like you're not having a religious experience watching a Michael Bay.
Mm.
They're about, but they're fun. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. There's so much to that concept of life as a story and putting yourself into art. Sure. Something else that we wanted to talk about was this Bible study, I think it is, that you're putting on YouTube here. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so this has been a passion project of mine since I completed my doctorate and thought, well, I have nothing else to do. I will start creating small group curriculum. And I had done this in a smaller format before, because I had written a small group curriculum for a film called Cage No More in 2016. I had written church curriculum that went out with the film there. Just kind of knew a little bit about what I was doing and wanted to take a year-long journey through the sermon. That was the goal. And I had started the writing process when we lived in England. I had filmed some of it, didn't quite get it done before we were moving, and put it all on hiatus. And then we got settled here in Australia, began working on the writing and building. It is going to release in 2026. And every week, every Sunday evening for those of you in the States, every Monday morning for those of us here in Australia, we'll be releasing a 10 to 20 minute long small group video about some portion of the Sermon on the Mount. And over the course of the year, we're going to go through the entire Sermon on the Mount. And it seems like it's a long time, and it feels like it's a long time, but trust me, I could have spent so much more mining these words of Jesus. It is the most important sermon, the largest sermon from Jesus in Scripture. To me, it is the constitution of God's kingdom. This is Jesus saying what his followers should be like, what it's like to be part of the kingdom community of God. And it has been absolutely revolutionary in my own life. And I'm really excited to share that with everyone. So it's all set up. It's all ready to go. I have every single video scheduled from the first Sunday Monday in January 2026, all the way through to December 2026 when we're going to end this thing. And it's going to be a complete social media experience. If you're like, I don't have 10, 20 minutes, that's fine, because Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'm going to be sharing short form videos on all social media platforms, on my Facebook page, on Instagram, on TikTok. God forbid I'm on TikTok.
I am too, brother.
But that's where the people are. So you go there, and really, I want to make the Word of God accessible. And I say that as if there's not 100 different translations of Scripture that you can get for free online. What I had found personally was that for small group curriculum, it can get expensive.
Yes.
As a pastor, as a youth pastor in particular, when I was purchasing curriculum for Sunday school or for our youth group nights, I was in a place, fortunately, because of the Life and Story, I could get a lot of that curriculum for free because I just write a review about it. But I still saw where a lot of churches, a lot of places struggle with that. And I don't know if you've heard of Right Now Media is a big online. They're sort of, I would say, the Netflix of small group Bible studies.
Okay.
You do a subscription and you get access to all of their content, and they have some content that is, a lot of the content is theirs. They have some content from other providers as well. And I kind of used that as my model for creating Year on Top. But I didn't want it behind a paywall. I wanted it to be completely free and open for anybody to use. And I wanted them to be able to access it where they were at. There's going to be daily reflections, like I said, daily short form videos. There's going to be daily quotes and photo images from the main content, all stemming off of that. So you can engage with it wherever you are, however much time you have, to really provide people, hopefully with a different way of experiencing or looking at Scripture. Because again, we talked about earlier that there are so many people that they love Jesus, but they're not sure what to do with the church. And this is a way to sort of bridge the gap, to bring people together in communities. Hey, you are doing this study. In 2026, you're sitting down at this video, maybe not at the same time. You're sitting down at this video, and hopefully at least tens, hundreds more people that are wanting to learn from this material, that are wanting to grow in their faith, that are wanting to know what it looks like to be part of God's kingdom. And through that, be drawn closer to God and be drawn closer to each other in community.
Well, so I want to say, first of all, I get where you're coming from with the Sermon on the Mount. I am a big fan of the Bible Project. And I don't know if that's something you're familiar with.
Yeah.
They do some great stuff, and they did a series on this. And there's a lot to. So I agree, this is something that can easily take a year. Everything that Jesus says in this sermon, which is probably more like a collection of simple sermon, a period of time. I'm curious what the filming process of this was like, and is this just sort of Dr. Josh Holt's, a headshot of you giving the talk, or is there some cinematography going on? What is it?
It is mostly me in front of the camera, standing out in a field in a wide country here in Australia. I went out to just a local green space that we have and sort of nestled away to where it's far enough away from traffic and people that I wouldn't be bothered. I wouldn't be bothering anybody. And we've got this lovely background that is just the Australian landscape. And it's me talking to the camera. We've got some intros and outros. I've tried to be a little fancy with the video editing, but not too much. So it was quite the process. I did all of this myself. I learned all of it from scratch. I'm a pastor and a writer. I am not a video producer. But I obtained the tools and learned then how to do all of that. So
and that's beautiful, because this is what we're all about here.
It's not a professional production, but it was me with my iPhone and a couple of good microphones. Was really all that it is.
And you can do so much with those basic tools.
Yeah.
I think that it's funny. I was watching this video on YouTube earlier today of this guy, he was college age in this journey where he he wants to design the perfect water bottle. And he just talked about his process of these three things he had to overcome. And he's not an engineer. He wasn't an engineering student. He was a sports guy, and he just wanted to design the perfect sports water bottle that wasn't a squeeze bottle. It was a solid insulated bottle that was easy to open and close. And thing that I took away from it was we as creative people who are on a shoestring budget most of the time, we just have to do whatever it is we can with whatever it is we have to follow our dream and our passion and get it out there. We can't be afraid of failure other than, and this is somebody previously a few weeks ago talked about, failing is just a way of learning. And we can't be afraid to fail because failure is a tool of learning. So make no apologies for it. Your iPhone microphones making use of the beautiful landscape that your country has, that your new country has. Yeah, I just wish it wouldn't have to kill everybody who lived there. But yeah, I think that's amazing. And so that's going to debut the 1st of January.
I think the first video will go up on, what is the first Monday in January? Is that the 6th? The 5th? Yeah. So it'll be the 5th, and I don't know the exact time. Yeah. Jump back for the 6th. But yeah, that first full week in January is when you'll see it.
And I know that you're pouring a lot of energy into this, and you're not asking in return. And that is very generous of you. Are you giving people the option of repay for this project?
It's not set up yet. Yeah, it's not set up yet. It is one of the last things that I still have to do is to sign up a way of just the giving, if you wish, on the website. So it'll be at joshschultz.com when it does go live. Another way that you could support financially is I do have a series of workbooks that go along with the content. Actually, I have them right over here. So
okay, yeah, show us the.
Where are you up with it? They are over here. Around, I have a share. So if I didn't know how much of the project this was going to be, I probably would not have done it.
See, that's the other thing.
Here's what I wrote.
Oh, wow.
So these are all, these are 6 leaders guides, 6 participants guides that go along with the series and takes you through each series. So yeah, we'll start with, I'll just open up one. So the leaders guide here, these will give you an introduction, the icebreaker. Basically, if you are leading this with a small group in your church, this is your one-stop shop to creating a curriculum around it. Opens with an icebreaker, has Bible readings for you to do, includes the game, discussion questions, and you can take from it what you want, don't use what you don't want to use. And then there's also a participant's guide that goes along with that. It's basically the same thing, but gives a lot of blank space, an underlying space for people to write in their answers to reflections and questions and so on. So that is the only thing that is a paid thing. It is only paid because it requires my to,
of course,
to grant you buy and send them out. So that is one way. If you want to get your church involved in the project, then you can do that. Again, all those are available. They will be available directly at joshschultz.com. Currently, if you go to Amazon and search here on the top, Josh Schultz, you will find the series and you can purchase from there.
That's awesome. I think that is just an amazing display of your creativity. That's a great project. So it's been years in the making as you started.
It has, yes. It started as a sermon series in 2019, preaching through the Sermon on the Mount. It got waylaid by COVID. I then left the church and did all the moving around. And so then, adapting it and came back to it. This has been something that has been on my heart for really an active work for about 3 years now, and finally coming to fruition. So I'm excited to just get it out there in the world, and I'm also excited to now start new projects that are hopefully not as labor intensive. My wife is like, I don't know that a 2-week series was the best one for you to start on. Like, why not a 4-week series? Wouldn't that have been much better?
Go big or go home.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
That's fantastic. Well, Josh, I want to thank you for your time and for talking to us about these great projects that you've been a part of. Jealous of your time with Ted Dekker. Obviously, that sounds like it was. I would encourage you to go back to the fiction well at some point, because Jesus made use of telling fictional stories. As far as we know, the parables probably were fictional stories that he used to teach lessons. So I would encourage you, one brother to another, to go back to that well and use those skills as well as your teaching skills to spread the good word. We can find you at joshol.com.
joshol.com and lifeisstory.com. 2 places you can find me. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/Dr. Josh Olds. That's my name. I'm old school, so Facebook is still my main social media. I know a lot of people have moved on from that to other things, but I'm clinging to that social media. The social media that I discovered when I was in high school, the one that I was also on Instagram, you're on Mountain Pop, TikTok, and Dr. Josh Olds. Yeah, but you can find all that. The central hub for all of that is going to my website at josholds.com.
Fantastic. Make sure to have links to all that in the show notes. And I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Doc.